Hello, hello. So I'm going to ask you, Sophie, to describe yourself, and then you'll start with an introduction to who you are, and then away you go with your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, so my name's Sophie O'Neill. I am wearing a fluffy polo neck jumper and I have curly hair. I'm a communications specialist working across education and arts and culture, as well as kind of public sector as well. And today I'm going to be talking about kind of content and social media trends for 2025. Great. So as I said, I'm talking about social media and content trends and things to look out for 2025. So the first of these is, as I'm sure you'll all be aware, kind of AI content curation. Content, I should have put creation there. AI content creation means using tools powered by AI to generate content. So AI chatbots like ChatGPT use language-based models, meaning it will respond to the text you input and generate outputs based on the data that it gathers. It can create anything from long-form blog content to social media captions to recipes, kind of you name it. And it's also used for drafting copy, creating images. So you might have seen images and even video created by AI online now. And also for summarizing texts and finding key points or messages, as well as translating copy into different languages. So there's a real broad range of uses for AI. And a recent HubSpot survey showed that 33% of marketers who use AI use it to generate ideas for content. The benefits of using AI for content creation are efficiency and scalability. It's also cost effective. It can be used to improve SEO and also to overcome kind of writer's block. So to give you a sort of starting point to jump off from. There are some considerations around AI, and again, I'm sure that everybody on this call will have interacted with this in different ways about how it might affect their business or how it affects their kind of life, really, because it's just such a big emerging kind of topic. But in the context of sort of content creation, it's really thinking about quality concerns. So, just asking it to produce something and then not kind of quality checking it. The possibility of plagiarism. There's also a devaluing of content that is kind of appears to have been created by AI and by the algorithms on various social media and search engines, so it can kind of devalue your content and therefore not improve your SEO. And then there's also a lack of creativity and personalization. And there is an element of human editing still required, and it probably at the moment can't generate new ideas. So in terms of tips for how to kind of use it best in the coming year, use it for brainstorming and ideas generation. So kind of when you are trying to think of what you might be able to produce as a caption for social media, for example, ask it to come up with some thoughts. It won't be able to come up with something completely brand new, but if you put in a reasonably good query, then you will get a good response on that. Use it for research and for data gathering. So it's a good way of kind of finding out, summarize changes in X, or summarize the latest developments in Y, and it can kind of produce some sort of research for you, which you can then use. Always edit and refine the content that it produces, so that you can make sure, as I said, that the quality is there and that the kind of accuracy is there, and also look into the kind of rights aspect of it as well to avoid that plagiarism issue. So zero-click content is another trend that's emerging in 2025. So that's kind of sometimes referred to as in-channel content. It's content that provides valuable information to users without them having to leave a platform. So it might be X threads with lists, stories, case studies, or step-by-step instructions. It could be LinkedIn carousels with slides that kind of explain a concept. YouTube Shorts, Snapchat or TikTok videos that teach recipes or how-to guides or tutorials. and Instagram carousels as well, with insights, data points, or sort of key takeaways. So the benefits are that algorithms like zero-click content better. Obviously, the platforms themselves want you to spend as much time as possible on their platform so that they can maximize the kind of value they extract from your attention. And therefore, the algorithms will prefer or express a preference for the content that kind of keeps you on that platform. They benefit users, so more content in less time. There's no clickbait, and there's a guaranteed value to the user. And they can also help to build your social brand and tone of voice. So tips for how best to kind of use zero-click content. Share the key messages up front, e.g. Including in the first X post in a thread or the first image on a carousel, etc. Offer standalone value, ensure clear purpose and actionable content, keep it short, keep it accessible, repurpose longer form content, so sort of develop something that might exist elsewhere into something which can be used sort of as zero-click content. Use the native features and be an earlier adopter of them. So things like when threads first came out on X, as was now is Twitter, and other kind of features that come through, sort of be one of the first people to use it, and that kind of increases the preference expressed by the algorithm for your content, but also allows you to kind of be ahead of the curve, ahead of the trend, and also kind of make sure that you're tracking the performance of this content. So a lot of the time you will find that reach and engagement are often kind of described as sort of vanity metrics, but actually for this type of content, it is worth looking at those because obviously it is the kind of measurement of the content performance in channel.
So can I?
Sophie,
can I just interrupt you? You're talking about zero-click content. But how does that differ from any other content? I mean, obviously it means you don't have to click, but how would somebody's listening to you thinking that's really interesting? How would they check whether their content was zero click or not at the moment?
I suppose zero-click content is content that's designed to be consumed in channel, so you wouldn't have to leave the platform to use it, whereas a lot of content is designed to inspire some kind of action, i.e. sort of you look at a video on, say, looking at a short video on YouTube, and in the caption there's a link to your website, or there's something saying go to this web page, view this thing, that there's an idea of you're kind of using that content as a step within a journey that helps that brings the user from kind of point A, where they first see that piece of content, through to point B, where you want them to be, where you want them to complete whatever action it is. Whereas with zero-click content that's designed to be consumed in channel, it's a kind of end-to-end process in and of itself. Does that make sense?
It does. And we've got 10 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So balancing long and short form content is another kind of important trend for 2025, as it's sort of the stratification of content from very short sort of snackable content all the way through to kind of longer form. So short form is generally lower than 1,000 words. It could be short, it could be even much shorter than that. Blogs, GIFs, videos, email, social media posts. Long form would be more than 1,000 words, and that could be white papers, ebooks, guides, long form video, long form blogs. So benefits of short form is that it's easier for users to consume, it's typically mobile friendly, it's less resource intensive to produce and easier to scale compared to long form content, and it's kind of more shareable due to its brief and often punchy nature. Benefits of long form, better chance of getting keyword rankings, so it boosts your search engine visibility, tends to earn more backlinks, so that's links from other websites driving to your website, so that also improves your SEO, stays more relevant for a longer period of time and attracts traffic and engagement for a longer period as well. It can be repurposed for other platforms, which again means that it's got better kind of return on investment. So coming back to what I sort of talked about around the zero-click content, it can kind of be used to repurpose And it can position you as a thought leader by using research and insights. So tips for getting the balance right: develop the content based on your goals. Are you trying to establish your company as a thought leader, and you might want to use some long form content, or are you kind of looking to promote customer loyalty and brand affinity with new prospects, and then you might want to use a short form content for that. So it's about thinking about what's the right type of content for what you're trying to get the audience to do. Understanding your audience and what content they engage with, considering the platform that they are using, and asking what type of content they're looking to find when you're searching your keywords. So kind of doing some keyword research and seeing what type of content comes up. And again, talking about repurposing long form content to short form content where appropriate. So next one is user generated content. So UGC, you'll sometimes see it referred to as, this is original brand specific content created by customers and published on social media and on other channels. Could include images, videos, reviews, testimonials, and it influences other customers' buying decisions. So as you can see, some research by Adweek shows that 85% of people say it's more influential than content made by brands. 93% of marketers agree that consumers trust content created by customers more than by brands. 79% of people say that user-generated content highly impacts their purchasing decisions, and consumers find it nearly 10 times more impactful than influencer content when making a purchasing decision. So the benefits are it's cost effective, it has the potential to go viral, it increases brand loyalty, it increases social proof, and has a sense of authenticity. So the focus tips are to focus on the most relevant channels. So think about, again, which channel are your audience on, and where might they be likely to kind of want to create things. Set clear goals for the activity and measure its performance. Keep the barrier to entry low, so make it easy for people to create the content. Make sure you have the right permissions to use what content they create wherever you're planning on using it. And use your customer service data to develop ideas. So working with your kind of, could be your box office team or your customer service team or whoever it might be, to kind of think about what are kind of customers talking about, what kind of reviews are they giving, and how can we kind of use that to generate content. So next one is the use of social as a search engine. So some key kind of, oh sorry, I've skipped a slide, yeah. So some key kind of points here, that social search is the practice of looking for products, information, and brands, or anything else directly within a social media platform. So as you'll probably know, most platforms have a native search bar, and people will search kind of for what they're looking for there. So why is this kind of becoming more of a trend? It's because most sort of standard search engines are very information driven rather than entertainment driven, whereas social is obviously kind of entertainment driven. So the engagement is sort of higher. Browser search doesn't vary significantly across users and locations. Depending on the search term, you're likely to return similar search results, whereas social search is much more personalized and therefore more targeted towards different users' interests. As part of that, each platform's algorithm enables it to cater for user preferences. So it can return search results that the user will like more. And some research by Forbes showed that 24% of consumers now use social media to search. 46% of Gen Z users using social media are using social media as their primary search engine. So some points for kind of best practice here. Thinking about hashtags. Hashtags sort of are one of those things that potentially are not what they once were in terms of a kind of really core component of sort of social search, because the search engines within social platforms are a bit more sophisticated, but they are still important. So hashtags work differently across different platforms. Facebook, they should be embedded in a sentence and avoid spaces, punctuation, and symbols. Instagram should be used on Reels to increase visibility and to kind of target key demographics and niche communities. Similarly with TikTok, they can be used to target key audience groups and to jump on trends, as well as kind of gather inspiration and from other brands and content creators. And on LinkedIn, they should be used very sparingly. There is a tool on LinkedIn which has a analytics feature built in that you can use to inform your choices, but they're not so sort of prevalent on LinkedIn. So tips for using them in general, for social search in general, sorry, using keywords in your bios and in your captions, use subtitles in video content, post consistently, so sort of with a posting schedule that ensures you're covering each channel kind of with the same regularity. Ensure you have the same profile picture, handle and brand name on each platform, if possible, to make them instantly recognizable. Add location tags where possible and appropriate so people can see where things are happening. Use high resolution photos and videos. That's will help boost your ranking. Look at analytics to understand what resonates with your audience, and ensure that all links are clickable. So last kind of little thing from me is just thinking about platform shifts in 2025. So LinkedIn is becoming increasingly a social platform, and it's kind of replacing Twitter/X for sector related news and engagement. LinkedIn newsletters are becoming increasingly popular. So it's a great place for kind of thought leadership activity and kind of engaging with kind of other organizations. Reddit is also becoming increasingly popular. It has a high focus on authenticity. It's a great place for social seeding, which is kind of placing your content in key communities. So if you have like a video or something that you want a certain group of people to see, it's quite easy to find the relevant subreddit and kind of to place that content there. You can also understand your audience better by lurking on relevant subreddits to kind of do a little bit of social listening. And TikTok, as everybody knows, is becoming even more popular, and it's also becoming a destination for news and shopping, as well as kind of brand and individual content creation. So something to watch out for as well. And that's it. I think Linda said that we'll be answering questions kind of at the end of the webinar as a group, but please do feel free to ask some questions then.
So we'll move on at this point. So, you know, Sophie was talking about, you know, she sort of started by thinking about sort of ways in which people might be, could be thinking about using AI and in their sort of content strategy, as it were, and was really sort of noticing, but, you know, obviously it can't create new content for you. And the other thing she talked about a bit and touched on was the idea of authenticity in content. And so that authenticity, how do you make content that really resonates with people when this sort of, you know, in a world where AI is becoming more used? We've asked Candice to look at that. So Candice, are you there and are you ready to kick off? Thank you. So that's
Yes.
So again, and Candice has slides which will also be available to people. So I would start, Candice, by asking you to describe yourself, do an introduction, and then just go straight into your presentation, and I'll just be around if there is anything that needs clarifying. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Candice. I'm a content marketing specialist. So I've got long dark blue hair. I'm wearing glasses. I'm wearing a shirt and a vest over it. So today I'm going to talk about how to create authentic content. But yeah, so just a little bit more about me. I'm a content marketing specialist specializing in making content and producing content. And I've got about 12 years experience in the arts and charity sectors. And I've worked with some of organizations like the Royal Court Theatre, Almeida Theatre, a career startup, Amazing If, and I'm now currently in animal welfare and I work for Battersea Dogs and Cats Home. And today I'm going to mainly talk about a few things you can do in the new year to create authentic content, even if you have very little time or budget. Just thinking about authenticity, it is a word that gets thrown about quite a lot, but when we actually think about how to do and create authentic content, it's useful to first identify your organization's tone of voice. And in other words, what authenticity means specifically to you and your audience. So what is tone of voice? A tone of voice is a brand's personality and how you communicate with your audience. It should reflect your brand values through the choice of style, the words and emotional tone. And it should be consistent, but flexible enough to be adapted to different channels, content types, and audiences. So for example, you'd want to be a bit more professional on LinkedIn and friendly on TikTok. And here I'm going to show you a couple of examples of tone of voices across the charity and commercial sector. Good things come in threes. A lot of organizations define their tone of voice using 3 keywords, and I can show you a couple of examples like this one, Shelter, right here. As you know, Shelter is the housing homelessness charity, and their tone of voice is defined as provocative, proactive, and protective. To them, provocative is to be brave with their words and tell the unvarnished truth. To be proactive is to write with energy, authority, and power to get stuff done. And to be protective, it means to use their words to defend people's right to a safe home and make them feel strong. Similarly, RNLI, which is the lifeboat charity, also describes their tone of voice using 3 words: active, personal, and reliable. So they believe that all of their creative content and basically anything they put out should reflect the active nature of rescue, should reflect the personal connection created through the rescuer and the rescued, and also the reliability of lifeguards and their lifeboat crew. So as you can see, the brand tone of voice doesn't just guide how they present themselves online, but it's also closely related to their values and should manifest themselves every time they communicate with people across any channels in real life and online. And thinking about the commercial sector, another organization that does tone of voice very well is online bank Monzo. And once again, they have 3 core principles. With straightforward kindness, they believe that their content should make complex things simple. As you can see on the chart here, they like to swap complex or like jargony words for really straightforward, simple language, for example. And with everyday magic, they try to transform the mundane into moments of unexpected delight, because after all, banking can be a very dry subject. And they also try and use warm wit where possible to keep things fresh. So just putting a couple of examples here to illustrate, and these are all pulled from their LinkedIn channel. Since LinkedIn is a professional platform, their content here is mostly focused on the experience of working in an office. And as you can see here, they try to inject humor into ordinary things like going back to work after the weekend and some experiences of remote working. And they also create a lot of witty and relatable content where people are part of the joke, which has been a very successful way to engage audiences and to build trust. As you can see on the screen grab on the right, where someone basically just said that they look forward to seeing LinkedIn, Monzo posts on LinkedIn every day, and it really brightens up the day. And if tone of voice isn't something that you already have, it's a very simple exercise you could do called this or that to help you create that. So starting with the list of opposite adjectives like the ones on screen, select the one that feels closer to your brand and cross out the other. So for example, you can think about whether you're more fun or serious, whether you're more spontaneous or considered, more personable or corporate, more energetic or calm. And you keep pitting the words against each other until you've got a list of 3 or 4 words, which should then inform your tone of voice. And you can start creating content based on these characteristics and then keep adjusting until it feels right and true to your organization's identity.
Is that, can I interrupt you, Candice? Is that
Yeah,
an exercise that you use in your work?
Yeah, so I've recently actually started working on creating a tone of voice specifically for video content in my for my organization, and that's one of the exercises that we used. And obviously, the list of adjectives are much longer than that, the ones that I've put on screen. But yeah, that I thought would be a very good starting point. And if you just look up like this or that exercise, I think there'll be more suggestions online.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so now that you've established your brand tone of voice, there are a couple of quick wins you could do to create content that feels true to your organization. So for starters, taking your audience behind the scenes is a really great way to build trust and humanize your brand. It allows you to show the people behind the work and to share your processes, knowledge, and practices. And by bringing your audience along, it increases your brand's transparency and trustworthiness too. So here are 2 examples of behind the scenes content. I'm not going to play the audio here just because it might come up choppy, but the visuals should still give you an idea of what the videos are like. So on the left here is a day in the life video I produced earlier this year for Battersea Doctor and Cat's Home, and it features a vet surgeon And by giving the viewers an insight into the vet's work on a day-to-day basis, through the story of a couple of dogs and cats that he's looked after and performed surgery on, it allows viewers to build a connection with both the human and the animal subjects and humanizes the brand. And on the right here is a tour of the City of Marion libraries. It's a tour of the library itself, but it's done in the style of a house tour. It's a spoof of a popular video format made famous by platforms like Architectural Digest and MTV Cribs. And jokes aside, it was also actually an opportunity for the library to show viewers around their space and to introduce them to both the facilities and the people behind the organization. So if you look at City of Marion Library's TikTok and Instagram channels, there's lots more content like that. And Denise, the woman in this video, has actually become a bit of a celebrity herself. And apart from taking people behind the scenes, a closely linked idea is to use humor, which is another way to build emotional connection and trust with your audience. Humor can make your content and messages more accessible, memorable, and relatable. And a little caveat is that humor obviously might not work for every organization or in every scenario, but it is a really good tool if you do it right. You just have to make sure that the humor is purposeful and find the right kind of funny that is unique to your organization. So the first example I want to talk about is Shakespeare's Globe's Dogs in Roughs content. So as some of you might know, the theatre has a dog-friendly office and a very busy costume department. So the social media manager came up with the idea to put some of the dogs in rough collars. And the content became an instant hit on their TikTok, so much so that the two office dogs have become an unofficial mascot of the theatre on social media. And some of these videos have over 350,000 views on TikTok. And the dogs have provided the Globe with a constant source of content that is unique to the organization. And I'm sure a lot of you have used Duolingo before and remember Duo, the green owl who can be a bit too intense and a bit pushy if you don't do your daily lessons. So when Duolingo's social media manager decided to lean into the mascot's persistent and sometimes quite awkward personality, creating videos of Duo being silly and following people around, reminding them to like practice their different languages, their TikTok channel blew up and now they have over 13 million followers on their channel. And it's worth noting that both of these examples had really humble beginnings and were created using just a phone and lots of creativity. And another recent example of using humor to increase memorability is the Ask Your Gen Z colleague to write the marketing script trend, which I'm sure most of you would have heard about, where you get older members of staff at established organizations show people around the space using mainly slangs used by the Gen Z. And the deadpan delivery and the juxtaposition of old and new were welcomed by viewers around the world, with museums, zoos, and visitor attractions in the UK, US, and even as far as Singapore taking part in the trend. And many of these organizations were able to introduce themselves to a completely new audience through this single video, and hopefully in the future increase their visitor numbers as well. And if you're a small organization, another thing you could do to maximize your resources to tell your story is to collaborate with other organizations. So look for partners that share the same purpose as you, whether they're arts organizations, local businesses, charities, social media influencers, celebs, or people in your community network. Partnering up with your other organizations to create content can often help you find new and unexpected ways to tell your story and show your connection with the wider sector and community. Working together also allow you to share insight, resources, and audience reach. This is a very old example back in 2020, but I still really love the Museum Beef partnership between the Black Country Living Museum and the Museum of London. So essentially, when the former challenged the latter to a TikTok duet to a Beyonce song, Museum of London accepted and responded with another challenge to a Lizzo song. So they have their actors in their space lip syncing to these songs. And together, the videos received over 2.5 million combined views and helped BCLM cement its status as the most followed museum of TikTok in 2021 with over 1 million followers. And another good example of unexpected partnership is Marks and Spencer's social collaboration with Mark Wright from The Only Way is Essex and Spencer Matthews from the Made in Chelsea reality TV. So this collaboration plays on a pun and the rivalry between the two reality shows. And playing on the pun, they created they created a series of social content which promotes the men's range earlier in the year. And it was really well received online, and so much so that they've actually just returned for a Christmas campaign. And while those two examples are more about using humor to increase audience reach, you can also use it for other purposes, like this partnership between charities Copperfield and Bloody Good Period. And this is actually more about education and normalizing conversations about breast cancer awareness and menstrual equity. And what happened was that both organizations realized that the audiences often have questions related to both the areas of expertise. So then they decided to join up for the day and swap their social channels to introduce their work to a new audience and do things like Insta story Q&As to answer people's questions about breast cancer and reproductive health. And finally, on a more practical note, if you're time poor, there are some systems you could put in place so you could focus on the creation of content. And once you have a system in place, it will give you ideas for content creation. It will help you keep your audience's needs and interests top of mind. And it will save you time, both in a day-to-day sense and when it comes to onboarding new staff members and content creators. And as a result, it would also encourage collaboration within the organization as more people can contribute to the content strategy. And it will also make the content work harder for you and your various content channels. So for starters, it's helpful to have a content pillar or content pillars in place. So content pillars are the main topics or themes you post regularly about on your channels. It helps, having the pillars will help you stay focused and stand out from your competitors. And it will also increase the relevance for your followers of your content. And as an example, if you're an animal welfare charity, you can have the following content pillars. You could create case studies that tell stories of animals overcoming challenges and finding a new home. You could create thought leadership content, which are opinion pieces campaigning for animal welfare and responsible pet ownership. You can give pet advice and tips on how to look after your pets. And you could work with celebrities and influencers to increase your audience reach and brand recognition. And another thing you could put in place is the content calendar, which would help you plan content for the week or month ahead instead of doing it on an ad hoc or purely reactive basis. And the content calendar makes sure you're creating content for all your platforms and channels and ensures you're repurposing and maximizing your content across them. It also promotes consistency by giving you a view of the bigger picture and making sure you're posting regularly. So on the right is just an example of what a content calendar could look like. But if you Google this online, there are loads more templates and different ways to schedule that so you can find the best version that works for you. And aside from content pillars and content calendars, there are a few other things that you could also put in place. For example, it could be useful to have templates of blog articles, web pages, e-newsletters, graphics, and narrative structures for your video content and so on. So you're not starting from scratch every time you craft a piece of content. It's also useful to have guidelines of your most commonly created assets like photography, video, written content, or social posts, as well as a list of deliverables such as the format of the content and its specifications, to make sure when you're creating one piece of content, it can also be repurposed into different versions for different audiences and channels. So to summarize, we've talked about a few things you can do to create authentic content for your organization, regardless of your resources and experience. For example, we've talked about finding and using your tone of voice to create consistent content with personality. We've talked about going behind the scenes to share your expertise and connect with your audience, using humor to build connection and trust, collaborating with others to share resources and find new ways to tell your story, and finally, to put some systems in place to save time and stay focused. But most importantly, don't be afraid to experiment and play around with different ideas. Try, fail, try again until you find your brand's tone of voice and your unique way of sharing your knowledge and your story with your audience. So yeah, that's it from me. Thanks for listening. And if you've got any questions, you can drop them in the chat or find me on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Again, you've covered so much. Thank you so much, Candice. We've got somebody's asking a question about, when you're talking about systems, and I guess I'll get to it at the end. I'm going to ask you all if there's a particular kind of tool, because we set this webinar up thinking about arts organisations and artists and cultural organisations, particularly smaller organisations who may be working on a sort of a limited budget. So I'll get to that at the end and see whether anybody's got any ideas of sort of super lovely tools. And again, the audience might have ideas of tools that they use that help with processes that aren't really expensive. That will be a useful thing to think about. So there was one question which you may or may not have an answer to, which is, when you were showing us dogs in ruffs, and the question is there any evidence that those kind of humorous approaches sell more tickets? do you know, do you know if there's any particular, sort of research connection between the two things, being really funny, engaging with the audience, and increased sales?
Well, not a particular research, but I think like some people were discussing in the thread already, there's a whole like audience funnel of, so not everything directly leads to selling tickets, but when you think about creating content, there are content that engages the audience, so you become more memorable and people immediately think about your brand when they think about making a purchase. So I think humorous content falls more in this particular category, and then hopefully in the longer run people remember your brand more, so they're more likely to have a positive reaction to your brand and more likely to choose your brand when they think about buying a ticket to theatre. So I think at the moment it's quite tricky, especially if you're a small organization, you have the resource to find the direct link between content and ticket sales. But I do believe that there is something in that like you're not just creating content for an angle to which is sales. You should also create content for your audience that sort of that's entertaining and serves other purpose for them as well.
Yeah. And thank you for sort of pointing out that some of those really clever and funny campaigns were like one person with a camera doing really good creative work. I think that's important, isn't it? It's not all stuff that you need a sort of huge army of people to help you with. That's really good. Did you, just one final question, then we'll stop for a little break. Did you enjoy researching all the examples and that, sort of pulling all of that together?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I actually stumbled across the Marks and Spencer campaign when I was just randomly browsing like companies' Instagram, and I thought that was really interesting. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, smashing. So we're going to take a 5-minute screen break now. Keep the questions coming in because we'll have time to get to them at the end. And then at 11:50, I'm going to ask Holly to come back on, and she'll be speaking more about how to sort of thinking about sort of green issues and environmental responsibility in 2025. So I'm going to ask Holly to join me now. Hello.
Hi, Linda.
Would you like to start, as the others did, by describing yourself and then into an introduction and then just away you go with your slides? Thank you.
Super, yeah. Thanks, Linda. Hello. So I'm Holly. I'm a white woman in my early 30s with brown hair pulled off my face. I'm wearing a bright green knitted jumper with a black high neck top underneath. I'm also wearing glasses. So I will just share my screen. Here we go. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about reducing your digital carbon footprint for 2025 today. A little introduction to me. My name is Holly. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a digital consultant and mentor working with arts organisations, and I'm also co-founder and web lead of Good Egg. And we support fellow big-hearted business owners with web design, copy, SEO, and digital strategy. So I'm mainly going to be talking about websites today, but also a little bit on email and AI and how to use those in an environmentally friendly way. Everything I'm going to be covering is fairly practical, either as quick wins that you can start doing today, jobs that you can chip away at to get you set for the new year, or maybe just things to consider as part of your wider digital strategy for 2025. All the tools that I'm going to recommend are free. And I also just wanted to acknowledge that there's obviously a lot of nuance around individual responsibility for climate change, but as well as reducing your digital carbon footprint, lots of the tips in this talk have additional benefits around things like search engine optimization, accessibility, and mental health. So all of our digital activities that we do online use energy and have an environmental impact, which ultimately contributes to global warming. So I'm sort of focusing more on the how rather than the why of reducing that in this session. But these are just a couple of facts that have kind of resonated with me when I've been researching this. So if the internet was a country, it would be the 6th biggest consumer of electricity, and that would put it in between Japan and Brazil, and it would be the 4th biggest polluter in the world. I've also got a blog on our website with lots more facts and figures if that's something that you're interested in, and that QR code should take you there if you want to go back and look at the slides later. So just to kind of start off, you might want to find out how eco-friendly your website already is. There's 2 online tools that we have used for finding this out. Just as a little caveat, as with most kind of free online rating tools, the results on these sites are estimates rather than hard and fast measurements, but they're still kind of useful as general guidance. So Website Carbon will estimate your website's digital carbon footprint and give you general guidance on how to improve. EcoGrader does a kind of similar thing, but it gives you like a much more granular breakdown of what the different factors are that could be adding to your carbon rating. EcoGrader can be a bit overwhelming if you're not super techie. So I would go for Website Carbon if you're kind of just wanting to get a general idea. One of the key factors that these sites use in sort of grading your website sustainability is based on your website's hosting. I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail on that in this talk because it really will vary from company to company. Like if you've got a Squarespace website or if you're hosted by an IT department somewhere. But I'm really happy to chat about that in the chat, or if you want to drop me an email about it, then I'm also happy to go through that there. If you know that you do have control over your website's hosting, then the Green Web Foundations directory is a really useful resource for that. They sort of take into account things like carbon offsetting, sustainable energy, that kind of thing. So wherever and however your site is hosted, there are tweaks that you can use to make your site more energy efficient and how you're managing it more energy efficient. The kind of analogy that I like to use with this is when your car is very full, it uses more fuel. So similarly, if your website is very resource heavy, it's got lots of big photos and videos, lots of plugins, etc. It needs more energy to host it and also then more energy for people on the internet to view it. So the kind of bottom line of all of these tips is to minimize the data that you're adding to the internet, which in turn then minimizes your digital pollution. The other good thing is load times for pages and how fast they are is a factor in search engine optimization. So that's kind of a win-win for that as well. So if you only do one thing from this webinar, please start optimizing the images that you upload before you put them on your website. So if you are putting images that are kind of in the megabytes size, please stop. Like anything bigger than 300 to 500 kilobytes is too big. So there's kind of 3 steps to go through with optimizing your images. So the first is to pick the right image format for the job. There are obviously a lot more image types than this, but these are kind of like the big 3 for uploading online, and they're the ones that pretty much all the different website platforms will accept. So your standard format for images should be JPEGs/JPGs. The E does not make a difference. JPEGs tend to be much smaller than file types like PNGs, so they should be kind of your default for a faster site. PNGs are really useful if you need transparent backgrounds, so sort of logos, icons, cutout designs, but as they can be sort of chunkier files, try not to use them all the time. And then SVGs, which you would use for kind of logos and things, and they're generally quite a small file size as well. Next thing to do is to resize your images. So most computer monitors are no bigger than 1920 pixels across. So if you're uploading images that are kind of 6,000 pixels wide, that's a little unnecessary for the size of the monitor that people are likely to be viewing them on. A maximum width of about 2,000 pixels is generally a safe bet, but also use your common sense. So if you know that a picture is going to be on your website like teeny tiny in the corner, maybe take it down to a smaller file size. And lastly, use an image compressor. So these reduce the number of kind of colours that are in the photo or the picture. It's imperceptible to kind of our human eyes, but it reduces the amount of data that's actually kind of held within that image file. So it means that you can reduce the file size of the image without losing the quality or making it blurry. So we run all of our images through tiny JPG or tiny PNG. That's the website names. And it can reduce your image size down by kind of 70 or 90%. So yeah, I love tiny JPG and tiny PNG. Lastly, image management. So if you've got the option to enable lazy loading on your website, then do that if you can. Basically, lazy loading on your website tells internet browsers to only load the images that are visible on the screen rather than every single picture that's on the page. So the images at the bottom will only be loaded if the visitor kind of scrolls down, and that just makes your website more energy efficient and uses less energy for other people. And also, it doesn't really affect kind of page load for users, but if you know you've got loads of redundant or duplicate images in your image library on your website, just get rid of them, because it's taking up unnecessary server space and therefore using more energy to host it. And it just makes it easier to find images as well. So I know that all of the social media sites, and it was a sort of a trend that Sophie talked about as well, will want you to use videos, but I would say to try and use them sparingly on your website, just because they do use so much more data to host than sort of images or text. So if you are going to use them, kind of optimize them in the same way that you would a picture. So clip them down into the most important section. You can compress them in the same way that you do images. Handbrake.fr is a really great free open source tool that sort of does a similar thing to sort of bring their size down. You can also use embeds from other sites like YouTube or Vimeo, because that means that those videos are being hosted elsewhere, and it'll make your website itself much more kind of lightweight. And really avoid using autoplay on videos. You're forcing people to download the data for a video that they might not want to see. And also they're not great from an accessibility perspective. They can interfere with screen readers and just sort of be generally distracting for everyone, really. Hopefully you all have got good mobile versions for your company's websites, because well over 50% of worldwide internet usage is coming from mobile phones now. Mobile phones do also kind of have a lower carbon footprint in terms of viewing websites, just because of the smaller screen size and the fact that there's generally less data on the screen, so it takes less energy to load it. So good from a business perspective and from a sustainability perspective as well. Just to talk a little bit about emails. Emails also have carbon emissions. One of the big things that will affect the carbon emissions of your email, or whether or not it's got an attachment or not. So emails without attachments, depending on whether you view them on a phone or on a computer, produce 2 to 3 grams of CO2, whereas an email with an attachment produces around 50 grams. Very straightforward to kind of making changes to not be producing that 50 grams of CO2. So if you can replace an attachment with a link to either your website or something on Dropbox or Google Docs, that's going to be massively reducing the carbon footprint of your email. So it might be that instead of sending your board report as a PDF, you could link to Dropbox or to something in Canva, and that's just going to make it much more sustainable. Less sort of huge in terms of the environmental impact, but reducing the number of emails that you receive is also going to have a positive effect on your carbon footprint. Delete old emails if you know you're not going to use them because they take energy to store, and unsubscribe from mailing lists that you know aren't particularly useful. I also think it has the added benefit of making your inbox feel less overwhelming, because the idea of having nearly 10,000 unread emails makes me feel a bit sick. But I know that really divides people as to how you're going to manage your inbox. And then lastly, I know there's been a few sort of questions about AI and sustainability. Particularly, I know Sophie identified it as a trend for next year. I'm not going to say absolutely don't use AI, but I do think it's something that you need to be really thoughtful about. So if you kind of, I know they've been doing the rounds quite recently on a lot of the social media platforms, but kind of a few facts, I guess, to be aware of about using AI before you go and use it. So according to a study called Power Hungry Processing, What's Driving the Cost of AI Deployment, making one image with generative AI uses the same amount of energy as fully charging a mobile phone. BBC News suggests that by 2027, AI's energy consumption could be comparable to that of the Netherlands. And also, it's not just electricity that AI uses a lot of. The water footprint for using AI is really massive. So a recent study from the University of California, Riverside found that getting ChatGPT to write a 100-word email used around 500 ml of water. So that's the same as a plastic bottle. Like I say, this isn't me saying don't use AI, because there are so many good and helpful and powerful use cases for it. I would probably say from a sustainability perspective to use it in the same way that you would either choose to walk or to drive. Sometimes it makes a lot more sense to take the car, but in an ideal world, it would be great to walk the majority of the time. I really liked this quote from Sasha Lucioni, who is a climate researcher and wrote one of the papers I just referenced. So they said, I'm definitely not against having a smartphone or using AI, but asking yourself, do I need this new gadget? Do I really need to use ChatGPT for generating recipes? Do I need to be able to talk to my fridge, or can I just, open the door and look inside? Things like that, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it with generative AI. So just to kind of sum up what I've talked about today, let's start off by finding out how sustainable your website already is, and then that will help you make some changes, hopefully to go into the new year. Pick the right image format for the job, resize images and videos, compress them as well, say yes to lazy loading and no to autoplay, delete old media files, slim down your inbox and your attachments, and be choosy about using AI. So that's everything. I think we've got a little bit of time for questions now, but also really happy to answer any questions over email or drop me a message on LinkedIn. I'm Holly Close on there.
Thanks so much, Holly. Again, bags of information in there. Slides will be available afterwards. We have had one question, which I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer, but it raises an interesting question, which is asking so this is the question: what is the CO2 output from putting an image through tiny PNG per image?
Oh, that's an interesting question that I don't know the answer to,
Yeah.
but I would say the process of putting one image through once and then putting it on your website, which they might be viewed 10,000 times, because that image is going to be, 90% smaller. It's going to be 90% smaller 10,000 times rather than, whatever the CO2 process of putting it through tiny PNG is. So it is a bit tricky when you start putting numbers on, because obviously everything has a number attached to it. But I think if you're making something smaller at the point of origin, that's going to be much better than, just putting a 2 megabyte image on the internet that 10,000 people have to download, because then that's massive.
Because exactly, and the question made me think about the question to you is, there's all these choices, aren't there? Like you sort of, think, how do you approach this yourself in your work? What sorts of processes are you using to decide what you do, what feels like a sort of environmentally wise way to work?
Yeah, so I think it is kind of setting up those systems. I guess it's the same as like having the recycling, sorting out set up in your house, like figuring out systems and structures that are going to help you sort of throughout the day to make environmentally better decisions, and just, I guess, trying your best with it. Because I know, you know, I work online 90% of the time, so I'm going to be creating a lot of CO2 from that. But you know, there's also things you can choose to do, like our website hosting has carbon offsetting, and you can pay to you know, have trees planted at the end of the year. I know, if I guess it's like all kind of environmentally related things, like if you start to think about it too much, you can get very stressed or descend into a bit of a pit of despair. But I just think it's trying to be aware, I guess, of the tools or the processes that could have a big environmental impact, like using AI, and really just minimize them or using them as thoughtfully as you can, rather than it just being like, oh, I'll make a generative AI image of my cat dressed as Santa for lols.
Yeah. While you were talking, somebody has shared their email signature, which is that they put on all their emails to point out how much what the impact of emails is.
Oh,
so
amazing.
that's like, they're sort of small, and I, you know, again, I was sort of echoing what I was saying earlier. This is really aimed at thinking about organizations and people with a limited budget. What can you do that isn't got a money cost? You know, some of these things will take resource, won't they, in your time and effort, but not a huge money cost. So there's, I guess, you've given us lots of ideas, and other people might have things that they have done that would be really, really good to share. Okay, does anybody have any other questions for Holly, specifically around sort of thinking about greening for 2025 and how some of the things that you might be able to do for next year? We'll just, if there's not specific questions, then what I'll do is invite the others back. And we've got sort of 10. Okay. Rachel saying, oh yeah, which we didn't really ask you to cover, but any thoughts, Holly, just before the others are coming back in, on social media platforms rather than your own website? Is there anything else you would add about that?
No, it's really tricky because they're so massive and so resource intensive. I guess in the past, if we'd have been having this conversation 4 years ago, I probably would have said, Twitter's going to be less environmentally, have less of an environmental impact because it's text-based predominantly. But no, I don't think I can talk expertly about that, unfortunately.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. So I wanted to kind of carry on in the same vein with thinking, we thought the first half really sort of thinking about sort of content and how, ways in which you want to engage with people and some of the things that you can do and lots of tips and advice. And the second half, we're sort of starting to think about sustainable practices. And we were asked a question in advance, which I'm going to ask to each of you really, which is about, and I think Sophie touched on it, so I might start with you. You were talking about sort of repurposing or long form content as short form, and the question was really that we asked in advance was, how can you sort of make the most? You've put this energy, shall we say, into making content. What are some of the clever ways you can reuse or get most value out of the content you've got? Just any thoughts or advice from, and I'll ask all of you that question, but I'll start with Sophie, if that's all right.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think really it's about looking at kind of what the long form content was developed for. So say, for example, you've created a video that's kind of got sort of talking heads in, it's got all different kind of bits and pieces that's maybe like talking about your kind of, say you're a venue and you have kind of interviews with different members of the team, different things like this, and it kind of covers a lot of different stuff about your organization. It's about looking at kind of those messages in the whole and thinking, okay, which messages can we kind of draw out that are relevant to specific audience groups, and then how do we sort of carve up that long form content in order to distribute it to the relevant audience groups. So in the example I've just given, you might have these little talking head videos that are part of a longer video which is all about X venue, and then you kind of make them into really short form videos and distribute them on your platforms, looking at kind of where your audience might be, who are interested in a specific thing. So that could be an example of it. Or you might do something like, if you have like a long form piece of research that's kind of primarily designed for sort of thought leadership, and it's like a white paper or kind of long form blog that's talking about a piece of research, or some kind of longer form piece of content with a lot more kind of sort of meaty sort of stuff in there. Then you might think, okay, so how can we kind of draw out some of those messages and create content, short form content for other platforms, which will engage our audiences with the kind of core messages. So you might develop like a series of infographics, or I think, when I was talking about zero-click content, you might develop like a carousel on LinkedIn that kind of covers the key messages of it. And then, that's a way of kind of making sure that those audiences who are maybe not likely to click through and visit your website and read the whole thing, they access that information and they still engage with those key messages. But I think it's about thinking about your big kind of long form pieces and drawing out the key messages, and then kind of repackaging them for individual, well, for subgroups of your target audience, and then sharing those on the relevant platforms.
Thank you. Candice, do you have anything to add to it? Any thoughts on sort of making the most of the content you've already created?
Yeah, I would say a very similar approach to Sophie's, just always think about what audiences, channels, and purposes there are when you think about creating content. So then you can basically kill multiple birds with one stone. And it's just the sort of like having that forward thinking in advance. So then when you're actually making the content, you make sure that you've got all the assets in place. So it's like, for just thinking about some examples I've done in the past, say if you're getting an actor to do a talking head piece that is primarily for your audience, for your ticket buying audience, can you also get them to say a thank you note, which you can then send to a funder, for instance? Or if you're making a step-by-step guide for a blog, can you turn it into a long form video? And then can you clip it down into a shorter individual Insta stories? So it's just thinking about like multiple uses for one single piece of content. And because I primarily work in sort of like video form, a very, very quick tip I would say is to always shoot in landscape and portrait, just because, to always think about both aspect ratios when you're making a piece of content, because if you're making a long form that sits on YouTube, it tends to be landscape, but then if you then convert it into a cut down for social, it needs to be portrait. So just always have that in mind when you're shooting. So just like little things that are like good to have in mind when you're thinking about making content, I say.
Thank you. And Holly, do you have any gem of advice?
I guess just to sort of build on what Sophie and Candice said, as well as sort of thinking about your audience groups, I guess to kind of think about the purpose of the content as well. So even if you've had that sort of big long form blog post that's got a lot of information in, you can probably then pull that out into, an informative podcast episode, an entertaining Instagram reel, and then maybe sort of like a promotional Facebook post, that all sort of coming from that one central pillar. So I guess, splitting stuff out into purpose as well as audience can be really helpful for thinking about repurposing.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I just got a quick thought actually, Linda.
Oh yeah, go.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about images, because one thing that I'm trying to do in my work myself is just being really organized with my image library. Say, for example, if you take images for one thing, can you file it in a way that can be generalized? Say in the future, if you need a photo for a similar event or social post, then you know immediately where to find them. So if you've got time to do that, organization is very helpful in the long run. Just think purely from like a visual image side of things.
Thank you. That's great. And then the other question which we were asked in advance, and it's come up a bit today. So we were asked earlier on about some quite specific. Let me just go back to it. It's I'll find the question again, which was about somebody asked about, will we be covering, and I think the answer to this is this may not be your bag particularly, but she's saying, will we be covering content caveats, e.g. for cyber sickness brought on by scrolling or fast migraine spectrum triggers? And the question goes on a little more, but I suppose what I wanted to ask you was just really, when you're thinking about audiences and inclusion and making content accessible to all, is there anything that you're sort of starting to think of, or that you know, thinking about sort of next year and what we should do more of? That might be my question in making content or more accessible. Do you have a particular piece of advice or a tip that you would share with people around that? Which might not be I'm not necessarily expecting you to answer that question, because I think it's quite specific. Just wave if there's something that pops into your mind.
Just thinking about, once again, just about like videos specifically, just because I'm primarily a video creator. Just some general good practice, like always make sure contents are captioned. Always have like versions that are captioned and not captioned for different platforms. Make sure the titles are not in all caps, because everything that is in all caps is harder to read. And yeah, I think primarily with videos is that, and try not to use too many effects or fancy editing styles, just thinking about the motion sickness.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. Sophie or Holly, is there anything else that you would want to share?
I think in terms of those very specific kind of accessibility requirements, I wouldn't really be able to speak to. It's not my area of expertise, but I suppose it is very much about thinking about kind of what are the general principles, and then also I think for accessibility, considering your audience and kind of what what you know about your audience and their access needs, and just trying to build that into how you kind of plan your content.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Holly, is there anything you want to add?
I guess maybe just in terms of tools, I use CapCut, which is free for doing video captions. And they also have got like a transcription feature where they'll do a whole transcription of the video for you that you'll be able to pull out and just put on. I'm thinking particularly for like long form video. So yeah, that's free, and I found it really helpful, just in case people are after tools for that.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, this is another question that's kind of come up, was thinking about tools. Are there any new sort of tools or technologies that you've tried or are trying that you think people might like to know about? Is there some new thing that you're playing with a bit, or somebody suggested to you that we might share with the audience? And again, this is a bit of a spontaneous question, and there may not be anything in mind, but if there is. Somebody was asking earlier about, when I think Candice was talking about systems, are there any particular tools that you love to use that might be, new to people? Just wave if you've got something in mind. And actually, I might ask the audience that question as well. If there's anything you're using at the moment you think is really helpful and doesn't cost a fortune. Anybody want to just wave if you've got something, any of you, and if you haven't, it doesn't matter. We'll move on to that.
I don't know about new, but I'm sure like most people know about Canva, because Holly and I both did our presentation using Canva. If you want like, I'm using the free version as well. If you want just like a basic graphic design system that helps you put together like graphics, carousel images, presentations, that sort of thing.
Lovely. Thank you. Sophie, can I start with you? Is there one last thing that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I suppose just that, we've obviously shared a lot of different kind of information with people today. And my presentation had a load of different kind of things to consider. And I think just a kind of reminder for people that not to feel sort of overwhelmed by the possibilities of what you can do kind of digitally, and to try and think more about like what of the things that has been discussed today kind of resonates with you or sort of feels achievable. And sometimes it's about doing the things that feel achievable, rather than thinking you've got to kind of follow every single trend or do every new development that's going, kind of looking at what feels achievable and deliverable and what's going to work for your organization and your audience, and just kind of trial those things first, so that you feel comfortable, rather than trying to kind of do everything.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Sophie. Candice, final thought from you.
Yeah, I think like in the new year, I am interested in finding a balance between using AI to make things simpler for the work that I do, but keeping that creativity that is unique to humans, because ultimately AI I think my stance on AI is that they can make your lives easier when used right, but they can never replace the work that we do as humans, because we tell stories, we're creative. And yeah, that's something I'm going to explore in the new year.
So will you just experiment with it? Will you do it quite
Yeah.
quite a playful approach, or?
I think so. Just but like trying to use it in a sensible way without like Holly was saying, not using to generate a cat wearing a witch hat for the sake of it, but thinking about how you can actually help you and do things that would save you time, basically.
Thank you. Thanks, Candice. Holly, from you, if you have a
Yeah.
final.
I guess just kind of echo what Sophie was saying in terms of sustainability. I think it's just being super thoughtful about the tools that you're using and the processes that you have, and just really thinking, just because we've done this the same way for the last 5 years, is that definitely the right way to do it? And just, I guess, similarly at the same time, being kind to yourself while you're kind of interrogating those processes, because it can be, you know, quite full on to think about your sort of environmental impact for things. But the very fact that you're thinking about it, I think, puts you ahead of, you know, a large percentage of other people. So well done for thinking about it as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So on that note, I am going to say thank you very much to all of our panelists.